Welcome back to the Childhood Cancer Perspective, and thank you all for sticking with me through this entire journey. I have had the incredible honor of being able to not only share our story, some really, really big insight on the pediatric cancer world, but also being able to share the stories of so many others, some families, survivors, organizations, medical professionals. It has been incredible, and I have got more on the way. I promise you the next couple of weeks, actually the next month, is going to be really good. You're going to want to be around. I've got some cool guests lined up, and you're not going to want to miss it. This week's episode, though, I am going to focus on something that hit me really, really hard, and I actually didn't realize what was happening until this past week. There has been a show that my wife and I have we've been into. We started out something that we weren't sure if it was going to be good, and we can't stop. We can't wait every single Thursday for this show to come out so that we can get the next episode of what's happening. And if you all were fans of the show ER, something my wife used to sit down and watch it on reruns not too long ago. And then, we've moved on to other things. But this show that came out just recently, just this past year, was called The PITT. It's got Noah Wyle in it, and it's on HBO Max, and it is an incredible show. It is basically kind of, I would say, ER on steroids, but it focuses on an ER, a trauma unit. Over the entire season focuses on a 12-hour shift. So every episode is based on an hour-long shift, but it always seems to be a lot more than that. But there has been a new character that came in this season, and she's been dealing with something that we couldn't quite put our finger on. We couldn't quite figure out what was going on. And then this past week, it was revealed what was happening, and it hit me. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I didn't get super emotional about it. But I definitely inside, it was like a gut check after we kind of realized what was going on. And the focus is the new doctor. Her name is Dr. Alashimi, and she's supposed to take over the ER. She's supposed to take it over while Dr. Robbie Rabinovich is going to be going on this sabbatical, and she's supposed to be taking it over. But it seems like every episode, they focus on her for a very short amount of time, almost having trouble focusing on what's going on. Or she's kind of left in a dead stare, and people have to get her attention, almost wake her up out of whatever she's going through. And at this last episode, it finally was revealed exactly what was going on. And this past episode, they revealed that she is suffering from focal seizures, and she has suffered from focal seizures for years, and they're trying to figure out how to best kind of combat or deal with it or treat it. And that brought me to an extremely personal story. Now, what I wanted to say is this. If you're not sure what a focal seizure is, I think everybody has in their mind kind of an idea of what a seizure is or what a seizure looks like. Kind of a label that gets put based on visual things that we see out there. Now, seizures, you can obviously kind of associate a lot of that with shaking uncontrollably, and you have to kind of keep them from throwing up, or you have to keep them from choking. You've got to turn. There's a lot of different things that you associate with seizures that I don't think are understood in the way that I thought what a seizure was. And I had no idea what a focal seizure was until JC and I were in the hospital. Now, this was following our 40-day stay in the hospital for her stem cell transplant, okay? And we had to go back a couple days after she got sent home for her to do follow-up testing, okay? Follow-up blood work and some other testing just to ensure that she was still safe to be home. That her body was reacting the way that it should be. Her blood cell counts were coming up. All of that was going in the right direction. We had to be sure of that. So there's no signs of anything weird happening. However, what I will say is this. Multiple times prior to us going to her stem cell transplant, multiple times, when we were in the hospital for her doing a chemo treatment, and I remember a couple times in particular, but one time was right directly before we got sent to Milwaukee to do her stem cells. They said, we got to do this now because, she's starting to have these side effects. She's starting to have the effects on her brain, and her cognitive abilities are getting affected in a negative way any more than, brain cancer can affect it. And now going back, I realized that what was happening is that she was experiencing focal seizures. She would wake up and not be able to understand what was going on. She couldn't understand how to speak, how to communicate. It's like her brain and her mouth and her extremities were not communicating in the correct way. It was like a short circuit. And after a little while, it would start to improve. It would start to improve, and it would be like, okay, what the hell was that? And we all, even listen, it had never been said to me. Never been said to me that this could be a focal seizure. At one point, I thought that it was a stroke that she was experiencing because of the way that she was reacting and the way that she was not able to communicate, tell us what was wrong. She would look at you in the face and she couldn't say anything to you. She couldn't explain what was going on, what she was feeling. She would be upset and crying and she couldn't tell you why. Literally could not tell you why. I ended up calling in the doctors. I called in nurses. We called in Child Life and they came in. They tried to talk to her, kind of calm her down. I remember them specifically asking her, what color is this? And she could not say the word blue. It was like her mouth would not grab the signals from her brain and actually get the words out. She knew what she wanted to say, but it wouldn't happen. And this was scary because at that point, she was not in remission. She was in a relapse of what we were told was the same exact cancer, which we never confirmed if it was the same cancer, if it was the choroid plexus carcinoma that had relapsed onto her brainstem, or if it was something else that may have another type of cancer that had developed. We don't know. There was no way for us to really tell because of where the new tumor was located. And so we just kind of went with the assumption that she was in a relapse, but it was, the treatments weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. They weren't reaching her past that blood-brain barrier. They weren't getting to where they needed to go. And I remember at that moment, she started to feel a little bit better on the way home because we had to get sent home because we were going to Milwaukee. They said, "You've got to go. We're gonna communicate with them. You're gonna be getting your stem cell transplant. We're gonna get that started now. We're gonna get you admitted. We're gonna get this was early for what it was supposed to be." And there was that moment. Okay, we get into the hospital. We get admitted to Milwaukee, and she feels better. Okay. She's feeling nauseous, but I mean, again, associating this with her treatments, with her recovery, everything, that's just the way that it is. But she's feeling better. She's communicating properly. Everything is good. Things are going well. Now, we go through our entire 40-day stay at the hospital with her stem cells, and we get released at the end. Now, she never has another one of these episodes while we're in the hospital for that 40 days. Never once. She never has the problem communicating. She never has a problem with any of that. She goes through this process. It sucks, but never has that problem again. Like, okay, maybe we got somewhere with this stem cell transplant. Maybe we got to a point where the medication was finally getting to where it needed to go, and we were going to see some positive improvements. And so we get to the end where we're going to go home. We go home. We were home for a couple of days because then we had to come back, like I said, for her follow-up testing. They just do some blood work, and they do a couple other things so that they can kind of see that her progress is continuing to move. And first, I want to go into this. So a focal seizure, before I tell you the rest of the story, a focal seizure is often misdiagnosed with symptoms sometimes dismissed as psychiatric issues or mistaken for strokes. They can be focal aware conscious or cause impaired awareness, often stemming from scarring tumors or injury, okay? They don't always, sometimes, but they do not always have that dramatic shaking, okay? They can include fear, focal motor seizures, and this is the weird one, okay? This is the weird one. They're awake and alert, often experience an aura that lasts for 2 minutes. Now, they can appear conscious, but they're dazed, confused. Sometimes they're just doing normal things, okay? Here's where we are, okay? And that was something that I pulled off the internet because I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about and kind of the medical side. So we're in for her checkup, and we're sitting there and we're chatting, and she's got her little PITT because for school they had to keep a PITT as like a baby and keep it healthy and all this. And we're sitting there chatting, and all of a sudden she gets that super, super blank stare in her face. And she starts to get emotional. And I ask, "What's wrong?" She goes, I don't know what's wrong. And she's literally getting to the point where she's going to start crying. And I give her my phone because I figure, okay, here's my phone. You can watch videos, things like that. And she starts looking at it, but it's almost like she can't get her hands to do what she wants them to do. She cannot get her fingers to push the button. She can't. And she's getting frustrated. So she gives me back the phone and she just lays down. And I'm like, okay. I think maybe she's just overwhelmed. Maybe she's having a panic attack or an anxiety attack because we just left here like literally 48 hours prior. She doesn't want to be here. She's just scared. I'm like, okay, I just want to get her home. That's all I want to do. My only focus here is getting her home. Doctor comes in, said labs look good, everything looks good, and starts talking to her. But she doesn't respond. Now, she wasn't big on talking to the doctor. She wasn't big on talking to the nurses. She was very shy with that. So I thought, okay, this is just her, and she just doesn't want to be here, and she's just not responding. No big deal. And so the doctors leave, but hesitantly. Okay, they're cautiously thinking that something's wrong, so they leave. And I'm like, okay, we got to get you up. We got to get you because at that point she was using a wheelchair. We're going to get you in a wheelchair. We're going to get you out of here. We're going to go home and everything is good. And that's all I wanted. Now, keep in mind, I had nothing. Okay. I had her wheelchair. I had her pump for her formula because at that point she was eating through an NG tube. I had all of that. And that's all I had. I didn't have clothes. I didn't have a phone charger. I didn't have anything because I assumed we were there and we were going home. And I get her in the wheelchair and she, she's looking at me and I'm trying to talk to her and I'm not really getting a lot of response, to be honest with you. She's kind of looking at me, very blank stare. And I was sitting on the couch with my wife the other night and we were talking about this episode, this PITT episode when they talked about the focal seizures. And I said, that's exactly what Jay's had. I said, I have never seen, and if you watch these episodes, you will understand. Okay. I have never seen the light go out of somebody's eyes so fast than I did with JC when we were in the hospital at that moment. I had never seen the light leave somebody's eyes that fast and have almost nothing behind it. And it was and it ranks up there with probably one of the scariest things that I have seen throughout that entire journey with her. And she's sitting in the wheelchair and I'm like, okay, we're going to get out of here. And I'm kind of waiting for them to come in and give us our discharge papers. And she gets sick. She throws up. But she throws up as she's just sitting there. It's not like there was no warning. There was no heaving. There was nothing. She just got sick and just sat there like nothing had happened. And it was the oddest, weirdest, scariest thing. And I'm trying to clean her up and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And, the doctors come back in and the nurse comes back in and I said, listen, I'm just trying to get her out of here. I think she's scared. I don't want to put her through more testing. I just want to get her home. And they're like, well, this is what's going on. Okay, we need to get her an MRI. We need to find out if anything's going on. At that point, she had a shunt installed, so maybe that's malfunctioning. We need to get some more testing. We need to find out what's going on. And I'm mad not because I don't want it for her. I'm mad because like I said, I literally had nothing. I just wanted to get her home. I had just spent 40 days with her in that hospital away from the rest of my family. And I just wanted her to be home. She deserved to be home. And I know that was good for her. And I did everything I could. And I said, okay, we gotta get it. We got to get her tested. We got to do what we got to do. And we went down to wait for MRI for probably a half an hour, 45 minutes, and they just couldn't get her in. And she would lay there. And then she would start freaking out because she wanted to get up and her leg would start moving and things like that. I'm like, okay, she's actively having these seizures right now, not the violent shaking, that kind of stuff, just actively like her legs would kick, her arms would kick. She would get frustrated. She would get emotional, but she couldn't speak to you and tell you what's wrong. She's actively having these seizures. And they continued. And then they finally get us to a point where, okay, we're gonna have to admit you. We're gonna have to admit you so we can find out what's going on. They get us into a room, and by the time we're finally admitted into a room for her to kind of find out what's going on, she is essentially in a coma. And she stayed this way for a majority. We were there for 11, 12 days, and for that time, at least the first week of that, she was actively in this kind of vegetative state and could not speak to you, could not communicate with you. Every once in a while, she would open her eyes and look around the room, look at you, and then kind of just lay back down. There was no emotion. There was no smiling. There was no laughing. JC just was not there. And I remember that first night that we got admitted, like I said, I had nothing with me. And I called my wife and I said, listen, I don't know what's going on. She had, at this point, they had mentioned the seizures, but the way that she was just kind of now in a kind of a vegetative state, I thought it was something deeper. I thought maybe she had had some kind of stroke, and that's why she was in this position where she just couldn't do anything, couldn't communicate, couldn't talk, couldn't move, couldn't say what's going on. I thought that's what happened. Prior to any of the doctors really coming in and stuff like that, I called my wife and I said, listen, I don't know what's going on, but I also don't know if I'm going to be able to bring her home. And I was once again left in that position where I'm here all by myself. I don't have anybody to lean on. I don't have anybody to talk to. And all I wanted to do was sit at that bedside and pray that she woke up and started talking to me and told me everything was okay or just said, hey, what happened? And I was waiting for that. If you remember in previous episodes, I said that when she would take, or when she was given the chemo drug ifosfamide, she would spend 12 hours following the drug locked in the box, meaning she, again, could not communicate with you. She couldn't say anything to you. She couldn't wake up. She would look around and it looked the same. It looked the same to me, but she couldn't do anything. But then after that 12 hours, she would just sit up in the bed and say what happened. And she didn't remember any of it. And I was hoping that's what was going to happen here. And it didn't. And I remember taking the phone and it was on speakerphone and I put it up to Jace's ear and I said, it's Mom. And I told her, I said, talk to her because I don't know if I'm going to be able to get her home. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I'm alone here. And that's what we did. And we just kind of did that through the phone. And, they came in at some point and I asked the doctor, I said, did she have some kind of stroke? What's going on? Is it, is this progressing? Do we need to do something? I even asked about a medically induced coma to kind of figure out what was going on or maybe stop things from progressing because we didn't know. They had determined that one of her shunts was not working correctly. And so they adjusted it, or they went in and they actually replaced it. And, they did an adjustment and I was told, okay, that's going to help fix it. And of course I'm wondering, okay, when are we going to see results here? Because you go in and do that and days later and I'm still not seeing anything. When are we going to see this improvement? And of course they couldn't give an answer. And then they finally came in and they drained it. They drained the shunt, which did nothing either. They did the testing, the brainwave testing. They put all the electrodes all over her head. And again, they weren't seeing anything that would say that there was brain activity that was going downward. There was anything like that, but they couldn't also tell exactly what was going on. And to be in that position where you're there by yourself and not truly able to communicate to anybody else or understand exactly what's going on or what you can do to make it any better, it was really hard. It was really, really hard. And, I say by the grace of God, there was another family that lived close to us that we had met through BattleCorn, that we had delivered their daughter a package and we were able to meet them, that they were actually coming out to Milwaukee because their daughter had to do a test for a follow-up. And so they were able to bring me a suitcase, so I had some things with me. But if it wasn't for that, I would have been in the same clothes and everything for that entire time that I was there because I had nothing with me. I remember getting up in the morning, first thing in the morning I had, and I know that first night that we were there, and it was 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and thank God that the cafeteria was open, and I went down and I bought a whole bunch of food because I was starving. I hadn't eaten all day. And then first thing in the morning, I had to go down to the gift shop to buy a charger because I didn't have a charger for my phone. I didn't expect to be there. But I remember that they put us in, they finally did all the testing. We were in the ICU, which sucks, by the way. Not the people. Okay, the people don't suck, but the rooms suck. They have got more monitors and crap in your way, and they're not big. And we were in there for a while, but we finally got to go to a normal room on the neuro floor, which was the same floor that we were on, and literally steps away from the room that we were in with her for her original diagnosis and surgeries. And we were in a room there just so they could monitor her, and start to hopefully see some improvement. And I remember we had this incredible nurse that was not there all the time, but when she was there, she really did make Jace a priority. And it was because of her that we were able to actually get Jace home in a fashion that I thought was going to take. I honestly thought we were going to be there for another month. So Yanira, if you're listening, you are the most incredible nurse, that one of the most that I think we've ever had in our entire lives. And you really advocated for JC, and I thank you from the bottom of our hearts. That truly means the world. And I thank you so much for being who you are, for choosing that career path, and for using your own personality and your just incredible way about yourself to ensure that she always got what she needed and that we were able to come home. But I remember sitting in that room, because they did multiple tests, MRIs, CTs, all this kind of stuff throughout the time we were there. But I remember sitting in that room one day just watching TV, because she was either sleeping or just kind of just resting, just there, kind of still wasn't communicating much. But every once in a while I'd get her to give you a thumbs up, or I got her to do the I love you, but getting her to speak was something that was very difficult. And the teachers would come in and they would try to talk to her, and she would kind of get frustrated and roll over. So we kind of said, just don't worry about it anymore. She's just not into it, and we don't want to force it. I don't want to upset her. But we were sitting there and I heard her say, "Mom." And it was the first words that I think I had heard in a week out of her. And I said, "What?" And she didn't say it again, but I looked at her and I looked in her eyes, and that the look had changed. And it was almost like, "Dad, I'm here. I'm in here. Don't give up on me. I'm trying. I'm trying to get it out there. I'm trying to get the words out there. I'm trying to let you know that I'm okay. Just don't give up." And so I sat with her, and I sat with her, and I sat with her, and I tried and tried. And eventually you could get a couple more words. You could get more communication, more of the thumbs up, more of the I love you sign. And every day it got better. And our nurse, and she would come in and she would talk to her, and there would be talk of her being there longer and longer because of her cognitive delays and things that were happening. And she said, "I just think she needs to go home. She needs to be home with her sisters. She needs to be home with her family." And I said, "Yeah, you're right." Because that's the one thing that has always been a constant in her life, is having family there that supported everything she did and gave her the abilities to come back and fight this harder. And that is so incredible to her recovery, is to be home. And I said, "You're right." I said, "We need her home." And she did everything she could. And I remember that she had one of the drains put in, an EV drain, put in her head. Same one that she had put in when she was there prior, to help kind of get the overflow fluid from the shunt that was coming, and also from her laying down. And so they had that in, and they would have to turn it off for her to go to the bathroom, and turn it on for her to do this. And I would start to help her get up to go to the bathroom. She wanted to move. She was starting to kind of improve. And it just got to the point where they came in and said, "Okay, we've done this. We've done what we can do. And we see some solid improvement." They were trying to get her to do PT as well, but if you know JC, and I've talked about it in episodes in the past, she hated it. Anything that she was kind of forced to do that she didn't want to do, even though the positive reinforcement of going home was put in front of her, it was it. Like, JC was one of those children that you were not going to tell her to do something. If she truly didn't want to do it, she wasn't going to do it. Period. And that's all there was to it. And so there were times with that PT that she was doing it in tears, because she didn't want to. She'd say, "Yeah, I can walk up these stairs, or I can walk down the hallway." And all they wanted her to do was get up and walk, to ensure that, she wasn't developing any clots, and that her muscles were good, and she was able to kind of communicate, and she was able to get around, because when she comes home, you want to make sure that that's the case. And she did it out of protest, but we finally got the okay to be able to go home. And I remember I was so excited for us to be able to get out of there and get home for everybody. And she came home, and we had we still have it, this big giant stuffed teddy bear that she had, and we had it on the couch, and that's where she would lay. She would lay on the couch so that she could be with us. And she improved so fast. And it wasn't like it was something where she was getting up and now she's going to run around because she's at home. It was because it was her morale. It was her attitude. It was everything internally was now being able to be, expressed. She was able to speak. She was able to, let us know what was going on. She was out of that stage of where she just was, there was nothing that she could do. And I know that she was in there trying. But this, I come all the way back to the beginning when I was talking about the fact that, I got this from that episode of the PITT. And it's because watching these shows now, watching medical shows, watching, even if they're dramas like this, like ER or the PITT or something like that, I associate a lot, because now you hear a lot of those same words, you see a lot of the same situations, and you start to associate them with your own life and things that you've lived through. And now watching this entire season, basically, and we're coming up on the season finale of season 2, and it's focusing more on her, this Dr. Alashimi, and every single time they're focusing on her, and they're showing her just kind of blankly staring, and then she comes out of it, blankly staring, and then she comes out of it. Some people don't come out of it right away. These focal seizures are like I was saying, you have the ability to communicate sometimes, but you can get emotional, you can get frustrated. And I truly believe that, not being a doctor, not being a medical professional, and no matter what Google says or no matter what medical journals say, I do truly believe that when you're in that type of focal seizure, it's like basically your eyeballs are locked onto something and you can't look away. But what that does is that shuts down every type of ability you have to communicate, whether it's with your arms, your legs, your mouth, your words, it doesn't matter. All of that is completely shut off, and you're stuck there, and you're just trying. Like, I feel like almost you're inside looking out and you're screaming. You're screaming, and it doesn't matter because nobody can hear you. And I feel like watching JC in those moments and watching the light escape from her eyes and watching her look at me and get frustrated and get sad and get emotional and not be able to tell me what's wrong, and me get scared and frustrated because I don't understand and nobody else can tell me what's going on. And I look back to other times that she had this problem and realize she was having these focal seizures prior to going in after her stem cell transplant. She was having these focal seizures, and it was never, if it was diagnosed as a focal seizure, it was never told to me. I think a lot of things, especially in our situation, when the focal seizures that were happening, like I mentioned, when right before we went in for stem cells and she could not speak, could not say the word blue. I remember her trying to say it. And I remember, growing up, my mom had a stroke. And I remember that communicative when half of your face, half of your body doesn't work and you're trying to say things. It's like slurred words. It was like a drunk trying to say the word blue. And I feel like a lot of things, and maybe this is true for everybody, were associated with the tumor. We're associated with the cancer. We're associated with just side effects. She can't speak. That's the leptomeningeal disease, of which we also were not told about until it was too late to do anything. That's just the leptomeningeal disease kind of spreading over her brain and starting to essentially disrupt what's happening in her thought process to create a situation where things are going to be different. She's not going to be able to speak to you. And then when we came home, after being told there was nothing more we can do, once they got to the point where they said, go home and make those memories, then she came home and she wasn't able to speak to us again. But it wasn't It wasn't like the seizure stuff. It was literally like she was speaking, her mouth was moving, and no words were coming out. And then we thought, okay, there's something going on with her throat that we need to have checked out. And again, a lot of it associated with the cancer, with the leptomeningeal disease, with the side effects from the chemo, with the severity of the tumor itself, with all these things where it's like all this is like, that's what it's supposed to be, or that's what it's going to be. This is what you're going to expect to see. All of that. That's what we were dealing with. And so there was almost like we weren't going to come up with a new diagnosis or new treatments or a new plan. We were just going to be stuck with, well, that's where we are right now. That's the way that it is. And unfortunately, this is what we're looking at. So this is me. This is me as a dad. This is me as someone who sat here and watched it and had no idea what to do. This is me telling you, if it ain't right, make them check. If you don't feel like something's good, find out why. Never be afraid to ask those questions. I don't think, and I will say this, I don't think that we ever didn't do something enough to give JC the chance to survive. I think we did everything we possibly could to give her the chance to survive and thrive in life. I don't think there was anything that we could have done differently, because I think that unfortunately the way that the tumor situated itself, and I think the options she had for treatment were very limited, and I think we were just in a situation where there was not a whole lot we were going to be able to do anyway. I don't think it would have changed. However, what I will say is that you truly never know the answer to that question, because as we continue to progress in these years, and now we get into the 5th year of not having her here, then we truly progress into a position where we're always asking those what if questions. Like, that never goes away. So I'm always going to wonder, could we have asked more? Could we have done more? Could have been something different that we could have tried? I definitely brought up certain things that I found out after her diagnosis and after her treatment plan was created. I brought up certain things, but they were, I don't want to say they were kind of pushed to the side, but they definitely were not given the attention that I thought that they should have had. Again, there's nothing more that I can do now that's going to change what happened in the past. But I will say this episode is really to bring light to association with Hollywood, I guess, if you will. Seeing these types of things out there, associating with what I've seen personally and understanding exactly what's going on. And I guess the benefit of all this is that my wife never had to see this happen, never had to see it. I wish we could have attacked it together. I wish we could have been there together to be there for her. Maybe it would have, changed the outcome, the morale. I don't know. But, I take a lot of this stuff and I see it, and it makes me very emotional, because I know how incredibly debilitating these things can be, especially when they're so uncharacteristic of what you would think and what you would associate a seizure to be. And it's scary. It's very scary. But this has been, like I said, this was really kind of an episode for me to talk about that. We've been watching this show, HBO Max, not a sponsor, can be if you want to be. But we've been watching this show and we love it. And these types of things are kind of associating and coming back and hitting close to home. Like a lot of TV, a lot of real life reality type things can hit close to home. And I wish that they were. I kind of like when they're focused on like this. I like when they're brought to light even through Hollywood, because if you won't listen to me and you won't listen to an entire community, for some reason people will listen to what Hollywood says, or they'll look at it and realize that it's actually a real thing. I'm actually glad that it came out in an episode. I'm glad they're focusing on it, because it's a real thing that we really have to pay attention to. So again, thank you guys for sticking with me. Thank you guys for listening to this episode. And like I said, I've got some really, really awesome guests coming up in the next couple of weeks. So pay attention, stay tuned. Remember, every single Wednesday, new episodes come out. So I thank you again, and I will see you all in the next one.